Who am I is a pretty loaded text. Most most of us tend to not think very deeply about it. So while we are engaged in reading this together, contemplating on it, let's make the best of this. Contemplation or vichara, the Sanskrit word of the inquiry, the non-dualistic, highest non-dualistic practice is vichara, contemplation. Contemplation of what? Contemplation on the nature of my mind. It's a, it's a flip. It's not just thinking about things, it's thinking about what my mind thinks about and knowing the fallacy of what my mind thinks about. That is the catch. That my mind is constantly thinking of objects and things of that nature, and I'm embroiled with it. I am always paying attention to the mind. And I'm supposed to be looking at my mind with my mind, unfortunately, to begin with, to have to employ my mind to look at my mind. But I must catch my mind from knowing what it is engaged in thinking about all the time. So I think we should repose on words that we are not clear about or we are struggling to really imbibe their meanings. We should we should ask and talk and contemplate on it and move forward. So having said that, question number 18 and 19 that we decided to read today. Of the devotees, who is the greatest?
Of the devotees, who is the greatest? He who gives himself up to the self. He who gives himself up to the self, that is God, is the most excellent devotee. Giving oneself up to God means remaining constantly in the self without giving room for the rise of any thoughts other than of the self. Whatever burdens are thrown on God, he bears them. Since the supreme power of God makes all things move, why should we, without submitting ourselves to it, constantly worrying ourselves with thoughts as to what should be done and what should not be done and how not? We know that the train carries a lot. So after getting on in, why should we carry our small luggage on our head to our discomfort instead of putting it down in the train and feeling at ease?
Thank you, Katina. Sandra, go ahead.
I've been feeling of a lightness because I understand question 18 to mean that I am not the ultimate doer. So when I find myself ruminating, I remind myself, I catch myself as soon as possible, obviously, and I catch myself and I remind myself I'm not the doer, and I wait. I just wait, and magically it comes up in the moment, and I don't even think about doing it or taking action. It comes and I move through it. And I just feel that it's just a beautiful way to live. I feel lighter, I feel happier. And I love these songs because they remind us how to live, and just, you get bits of it, and most of the time you don't follow the bits, but then some moments you follow the bits, and it's just really, really liberating. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for sharing your candid thoughts about it. We are always oscillating, we're in and out. If you read just the first sentence again, he who gives himself up to the self, that is God, is the most excellent devotee. So let's absorb the word self, which could mean consciousness, which could be defined as God, which could be defined as the ultimate reality. The self, which Bhagwan used, Shankaracharya used that, and many other religions have talked about the self within myself. That self is very elusive. That self is mysterious. That self is within me, and yet I don't accept its presence all the time. I accept the presence of the world around me, which is unreal, as the real world. And I keep struggling, I keep swimming in the water when I should just be floating. I should be waiting, taking a pause, letting the self work it out for me. Just as it works it out, it executes every other creature's life except human beings. Every other entity survives, has a cycle, has a span. It functions normally. I'm the only one, human being, I meaning the human being, struggling, doing this and that, and creating a fake world around me. We continuously and continually continue to make more definitions of things, more objects, and more things around me. And I latch on to them. I keep latching on to them. And I don't focus on the self. That's why Bhagavan says he's the greatest of the devotee, the one who focuses on the self. And all of us are far from there. We have a long way to go, and yet we should not be pessimistic about it. We are not lamenting about it. We are not saying my nature is not good, or how not to do this, or how to do this, but to submit ourselves, partially at least. As was just now shared, partially at least we can try, and if there is even a small complex situation, try and leave it without acting upon it. Try without executing something to accomplish some outcome of it, and see what happens. And that does not mean that the result will be a worldly, in the worldly sense, it is not going to be a very pleasant one, perhaps not. When people write sometimes, Bandhuji, please pray for me, I have an interview, I'm going to get a job and all that. And I tell them, yes, I'll definitely pray for you. Definitely. And I do. And I sincerely do. And yet in my mind I say, what are we supposed to pray for? For yet another worldly success. And the best success will be when we are fired, when we lose something. And then it begins to sink in. These teachings begin to come close to us, come close to ourselves, to that self which is within me. It comes close, it comes home. Why don't we leave our luggage onto him? And it does happen. Some of us may have tried, and it does happen. Things do take place. They do get done. And that would be the right outcome. The outcome that comes without my effort is the only outcome that was destined unto this jiva, this life, this body. And as it is, I don't have any control. The self is so elusive. Just take an example. My biological functions, physiological functions, my mental functions, any functions that one can think about one's existence in the physical realm. Do we do anything about it? Start from the breath, digestion, and all neurological functions, neuroendocrine functions. Are we doing anything about it? And the whole machinery, the body, a sack, I take credit for it. Whereas I have not even an iota of an idea as to how long am I going to live or what is going to affect me. And unless it hits home, it doesn't. Then even when you're affected by a stroke, a cerebral stroke, a cardiac stroke, you are in the hospital, you can begin, if you're doing the mantra japa or if one is practicing this, it comes automatically because it becomes the habit of the mind to say, what am I going to control? Yesterday I was okay, today I have a stroke, I'm laying in hospital, so how is it different? Nothing is different. It's the same day. I didn't have control yesterday, I thought I did. But now that I've got an affliction, now I'm thinking, what should I do? I don't have to do anything. And with that, it does strengthen, it enriches my spirituality, it enriches my coming closer to myself. That's the only goal we have. And the life will continue. The mundane life will continue, and we should let it function without, again, condemning ourselves about it, lamenting about it, punishing ourselves about it, or anything. And that's all we are supposed to do. Our practice should be contemplation throughout the day, while working, while the worldly life is going on, while driving, while cooking, even while having an argument. And that's an experience one would experience only when one experiences it. That even in difficult, familial, argumentative moments, when you're arguing about something vehemently with and usually it's a dear one, a very close one, that you're having the most difficult times with, and a current flows behind. While that commotion is going on, there is a silent mode of that japa, of that repetition that continues, and you can still hear it. Though you say, why am I so angry? And yet that is going on. That's a blessing. You know, now you're coming closer. Are we all clear about this simple reading and yet so deep? Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Sandra, and good morning to everyone. Well, first, just a comment about the text on the screen. I just wanted to maybe get out of the way my thought on a technicality. Could you go back to the text, question 18? Yeah, so in the second sentence, giving oneself up to God means remaining constantly in the self. So they're both capitalized. So, but the first one is the egoic self. Isn't that right?
Sorry, say the first one is what? The ego itself, you said?
Yeah, giving oneself up to God means remaining constantly in the self. Self is capitalized in both cases, but self in the first case is the egoic self, right?
I think in this particular case, Bhagwan is talking about the ultimate self. To the best of Bandhu's understanding, Bhagwan is saying, giving one's self, that self is lowercase, that self is the egotistical self, you're right. Up to God means remaining constantly in the self, the uppercase, capitalized self. That is the ultimate reality, without giving room for the rise of any thoughts other than that of the self, again capitalized, meaning the reality. So
Yes, that's how I.
the first one is the ego, correct? The small, so the small s is the ego, the capital S, the uppercase S is the reality.
Right. So this is rather a misprint here that the egoic self is uppercase. Giving oneself up to God is also given as uppercase here.
No, that's the way of writing. He says, he who gives himself up to the reality, which is God, none other than God, is the most excellent devotee. So that is correct. That uppercase S in the very first sentence, the first use is correct.
He who gives himself up to the self, yes. Okay, and then the second sentence, giving one's self up to God. That self is egoic self, right?
That I would agree with you. That could have been a smaller one, giving one's self. So
Yeah.
that could be a lowercase. We could put it that way. Yes.
Yes.
You're right. Good catch.
Yeah. And just giving self, my egoic self up, also is quite a different concept, because not only do I not know the true self, even my egoic self, I really don't know. I have no idea what I am. If anyone asks me what am I, about myself, I can only describe certain attributes about myself. There's no way for me to say who I am at all.
Very well said. That's a home run. That's a bumper. Because when that clarity of what I'm not clear about is the best clarity to have. Am I making sense? That clarity is the best clarity, that I'm not clear about myself. Because as you very succinctly said, Peter just now said, if I were to define even my egotistical self, all I do is who I am, where I live, what I studied, what my job is, what my family is, and my accolades, so that I would get some compliment about something. And that's it. And that's my limitation. And
even my likes and my dislikes, even things I like, things I dislike, they change all the time too.
And that's the first learning. The experience of the ignorance dispels my ignorance.